Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for coming back if you've been here before, or hi, welcome if you're new. My name is Mickey, I'm a therapist, and we talk about therapy things on this channel. Today is a little different. We are talking about Roe v. Wade. I thought about cutting in just like a little section into another video that actually was supposed to go live this week that just got bumped for this, but this felt like it warranted its own video, and so, thank you for giving me the space to sort of deviate a little bit from our regularly scheduled programming, because I think it's just important to give this situation the gravity that it deserves. So that said, I want to give a brief trigger warning off the top, because we are talking about the overturning of Roe v. Wade, about, I don't know if I want to use the word and risk the censorship, smortion, reproductive rights, all of those things. And so if that's a sensitive topic for you, or something that you're just not in a safe place to hear about, playlist up here full of like fun, happy puppy times. Go watch that. Take care of yourself as always. I also want to be clear before we jump into the discussion that I want to host today that I am still a person with an expertise and, degrees in, like therapy and mental health topics, but I am also showing up today consciously on purpose as a human being. I am making this conscious effort to not position myself as an expert right now, both because I'm not an expert in reproductive rights, but also because I am a human with a uterus and I'm like affected by this situation personally. And so I think it's disingenuous for me to get on here and to try to talk about this from this like purely analytical place when it's not analytical or theoretical for me. It is personal. That's why it's taken me such a long time to figure out how to address this, because I have had my own grief work and emotions to work through before I felt ready to make this content. So I want to be clear about that like this is not meant to be, solely like therapy or, like expert sort of content. Like I'm a human also. So thanks in advance for giving me the space to do that. Okay, so first and foremost, I do really want to validate the feelings and the grief and the emotions that people are having. If no one has told you yet that you're allowed to feel how you feel, you are. All of the feelings that you're having are like so valid and normal and understandable and allowed. I do very much want to hammer home the point, especially in this video, but also on the channel generally, that sometimes the wisest thing that we can do with our emotions is to feel them and is to sit with them and to give them the space that they deserve. This issue in particular is scary, it's overwhelming, it's painful for a lot of people, and so I do want to give you that like validation and permission if you haven't had that yet, but also encourage you to give that to yourself because you do deserve that. I think the other thing about this that's important to draw attention to is that especially when we have a conversation about activism and being involved on a political level, the most effective and sustainable form of activism is the type where we're also taking care of ourselves and taking time for ourselves. I've talked about this before on my Instagram, but it is far less effective to be the person who is like aggressively involved right now, and is doing like a blitz of social media posting and showing up to things and being very outspoken about something, wearing yourself out, burning yourself out, and then not talking about the issue ever again. So I do want to encourage folks to take the time for yourself, because it's not selfish. You're not being a bad advocate. You're not caring if you need to take time to like rest and be okay, especially for folks who have compounding marginalized identities around this topic. It is simply unrealistic to expect that we can be on all the time. And so like, again, it's very much allowed for folks to take the time to take care of themselves, because especially when we want to see like large scale change around an issue, we need like concerted effort and participation over a long period of time. So be nice to yourself. That said, I want to get into a brief discussion about boundaries, because this issue in particular tends to bring up a lot of conflict in family systems and in relationships. And so especially if you are a person who has loved ones or people that you thought were safe and trusted that are celebrating this decision and indicating to you that they're not safe people, this brings up a lot of questions about like, how do I deal with that? How do I talk to these people? Also, a common question that I hear in clinical work is like, how do I make this person understand me or like be willing to hear the things that I'm trying to tell them? And so I wanted to briefly discuss all of that today because I think there is like useful evidence-based information for us to get into. Okay, hi friends, it's Editing Mickey. I wanted to pop in really quick before we talk about boundaries to talk about something else that I forgot to talk about in the original video, and it feels really important, so that's why we're filming this. Also, it's thundering outside. Sorry in advance if you can hear that. I wanted to encourage folks to have very open and frank and honest conversations with your therapist. Part of the reason that I made this video and that I am making a very public statement about Roe v. Wade is because therapy is inherently political. It's impossible for therapists to be this like blank slate of a person who doesn't have political affiliations or opinions about these things. And so you deserve to have a therapist and a provider who is on the same page as you, who is validating of the feelings that you have, and that you feel safe talking about those things with. So it's not rude, it's not invasive for you to ask those questions, and it's not a boundary violation. I also wanted to encourage folks to have this very frank and clear discussion with your therapist, because especially in states where there is gray area around the legal implications of disclosing information about your private health information now, it's very important that you know what your therapist's personal opinion is and whether they're a safe person for you to divulge particular types of information to. I want to be super clear, this is not legal advice. Again, I'm not a lawyer, I have no legal expertise, but I am a therapist and I do have a lot of expertise in that regard. And your therapist should not be a person who gives you some kind of like bunk pushback about like, well, why do you need to know? I'm very interested that you would ask me this question about. No, your therapist should be able, especially about an issue like this that's such a big deal, should be able to be very open and honest with you about their personal feelings, about what their policies are, what their feelings are. Don't get me wrong, your therapist shouldn't like dump their feelings about this all over you, but your therapist should be able to be clear with you about what side of the divide they fall on here and whether they're a safe person for you to speak about this particular topic. So I, again, just really want to encourage and invite folks to feel comfortable to advocate for themselves, because I've talked about this endlessly on the channel before, but in the therapeutic context, you as the client, as the therapy consumer, are the person who holds all the power, and you are allowed to say, I don't want you to be my therapist if you can't answer this question clearly and honestly for me. I don't trust you if you can't be clear that you're a safe person for me to speak about these issues with, and so therefore I'd like to exercise my right to discharge. That is so very much allowed. That does not make you mean or shitty. And again, any therapist who is aware and is doing the work to be politically active and like a safe person and participating in positive change should be able to answer that question for you. So that's that. We're going to talk about boundaries around this issue now, but I wanted to interject really quick and say that. So, okay, thanks, bye. There are like different answers to all of these different questions. So first and foremost, I want to host the conversation about boundaries. We have a whole playlist about boundaries up here. If you haven't watched it, go watch that. There's great information there. But just as a refresher, boundaries, when we're setting them from a healthy and safe and like ideal place, boundaries are self-focused. So they're something that we want to be setting with other people with the intention of preserving our own safety and meeting our own needs. We never want to use boundaries as a means to manipulate other people, as a means to force anyone else's hand, and especially not as a means to punish other people. I really want to encourage folks to take stock of our motivation and our desires and our end goals when we talk about boundary setting, because it's important that we do that work for ourselves and not for other people. That said, I think there is a lot of nuance here in like, how do I set boundaries with someone who has worldviews that dehumanize me, but maybe you're not willing to end that relationship yet, or you're not able, it's not safe for you to distance yourself in a meaningful way. And so we have these sort of like very conflicting things that like a lot of people are very confused about, like what the fuck do you do with that? The advice or like food for thought that I wanted to give here is that sometimes boundaries serve the purpose of teaching other folks what we're willing to put up with in our own lives, and also help to inform the people that we are in relationship with that their views are not theoretical, that their political opinions especially are not something that is like a thought experiment, that these are real life things that affect us, and that those opinions and thoughts and beliefs have consequences. A lot of the discussion with boundary setting is about like setting consequences for particular behaviors, and so sometimes it's useful to set boundaries from this perspective. Again, not because we want to punish people, but because if it feels important for you to set a boundary with someone for the purpose of preserving your own emotional safety and saying like, I'm limiting my contact with you, or I'm limiting, like the influence that you have on my children, for example, or how often you're able to speak with me. I'm limiting my interaction with you at family events, or like whatever that looks like for you. If you're doing that from the purpose of wanting to preserve your own emotional safety, and you feel able to communicate to them that you hold these beliefs or you've said these things to me that were deeply hurtful and dehumanizing and scary and unsafe, and so that's why I'm setting this boundary, sometimes that can be a useful way to educate family members or loved ones or friends or, you know, whoever, again, that these beliefs are not theoretical. This is not a thought experiment for me. This is something that really deeply affects my life. And so I'm not going to quietly approve of the things that you're saying or doing by saying nothing and by allowing you to continue to reap the benefits of a relationship with me, contact with me, if it's simultaneously painful or unsafe or scary for me to be in relationship with you. That's, I guess, the takeaway or like the take home message that I want to give to folks here is that, first of all, I'm assuming most of you, because of my analytics, are adults, that it's your prerogative as an adult human being to set boundaries with whoever you feel you need to, and you are allowed to set limitations there. Again, especially if it's because you feel unsafe or uncomfortable or, you know, dehumanized or unvalued by the beliefs that they're expressing. And a lot of times this is something that we don't really think about or talk about, but when we do, you know, have this like silence around these issues, even if it is not something that affects you personally, especially for those of you who don't have uteruses, but you do have loved ones that have uteruses, this is an important moment to take stock of the messages that you're sending and the relationships that you have, continuing to have relationships with people and, you know, not enforce any consequences around these behavior does sometimes send this quiet approval or this tacit compliance that you can host these beliefs, and that's not a deal breaker for me, essentially, that you can say and do and participate in behaviors that are dehumanizing and unsafe for people that I love or for me, but I'm not going to enforce any consequences for you. And again, this all comes with the caveat that if this only applies if it's safe for you to do that, if that's a feasible option for you. I also want to recognize that this is not a safe or feasible for safe or feasible option for all people. And so, like, again, this is the internet, grain of salt. I don't know your situation personally, so please take what works and leave the rest. But if this is a safe or reliable or feasible option for you, setting those boundaries helps to inform that, like, this is not something that I approve of. And again, I'm not going to continue to allow you to reap the benefits of a relationship with me if it comes at my detriment or the detriment of somebody that I deeply love and care about. This is also work that is sometimes necessary, especially if we have relationships with folks who are unable or unwilling to hear us, which is the sort of like part 2 of this equation that I wanted to talk about, because this is a common issue that comes up in clinical work for me. This question of like, how do I make someone understand me, or how can I better phrase this, or, you know, like set up this conversation to be the most optimally advantageous that this person will hear me. I think it's important for me as somebody with like the clinical experience and the expertise in this area to be honest that sometimes that's not a real option, that sometimes that's not a realistic expectation, and that's okay. Hear me out. I'm not saying that it's okay for someone to treat you that way, because it's not. But the reason I wanted to talk about this is because a lot of times when we try to have these conversations with someone who is committed to this belief system that is like directly at odds with our personhood or something that's very important or meaningful to us, the feeling is that if I say it kindly enough, or if I am nice enough and like sort of shit sandwich the thing where it's like compliment and then the bad part and then a compliment, or like if I have enough support, or if I provide them with enough evidence, if I give them all of the fact-based information, then they will change their mind. And the unfortunate reality is that sometimes people do not, and that has nothing to do with you. It's not a reflection of you being a bad communicator or not trying hard enough or you not caring enough or not setting up the conversation in the correct way. The reality is that sometimes people are unable to alter their belief system. This is especially important to talk about for folks like, like grandparents or older parents or like family members who have absorbed a value system from a different time and have chosen or are unable to let that go, because it's important for us to acknowledge and to honor that their lives and their relationships and their identities are predicated on a set of beliefs that if they do validate the things that you're trying to say, sometimes that might come along with overturning the thoughts and beliefs and the values, like the core beliefs that they have about themselves and their lives and their relationships. And that's a lot of emotional labor and like a very scary thing for a lot of people to do. And again, I want to be super clear. This is not at all like an acceptable thing. Like people refusing to change or be safe people or be validating for you, like they don't get an out still because this is hard, because this is a thing that people do. It is very much doable work, but especially for folks who don't have the emotional bandwidth or the emotional capability to even understand that that's what's happening in the first place, let alone to do that work. Again, we just run into this scenario where it can be an unrealistic expectation. And I want to talk about this not from the perspective of giving those people an out or saying like, oh, that's just how grandma is. Like, no, that's not acceptable. It certainly doesn't fucking make it hurt less. It definitely doesn't take away the grief and the pain that comes along with that. And it also doesn't entitle them to be in a relationship with you. However, I do want to invite folks to release yourself from this expectation of continuing to have this conversation and like invest this emotional labor in trying to change the mind of someone who is committed to misunderstanding you or who is just simply unable to do the work that is required for them to meet you where you're at. Especially in having a conversation about like the wise use of our emotional labor to be advocates and to be organizing and participating. Sometimes we hit this threshold where like that energy feels like it's more effectively or better or more safely used in a different arena. And if that's where you're at, I do really want to encourage people to honor that for yourself and to give yourself permission to let go. And again, to set those boundaries in whatever way that's feasible or safe for you, to just say that like, this is no longer a productive or safe or useful conversation for me. And so therefore I'm releasing myself of that. That doesn't make you a bad person. That doesn't make you a bad ally or a bad advocate. Again, for all the reasons that we already talked about. All of that said, I also feel I would be remiss to not include some actionable items. I have spent a fair amount of time trying to compile a list of like actionable items and like opportunities for involvement or advocacy, and also resources on like a personal level for anybody who needs those or is in need of assistance or help. I have updated the description of my video or videos. Those resources will be there forevermore for as long as I can keep them there, unless I'm like forced to take them down, which at this point feels like it's maybe not an unrealistic potential. But I want to be clear that those resources are there if and when you or someone that you love needs them. The other thing that I wanted to talk about here is that, especially for folks with uteruses or who are directly affected by the overturning of Roe v. Wade, I want to honor that the invitation to advocate and participate in protests and, you know, like organizing and all of this stuff, like community, grassroots, like all of that advocacy and involvement can feel very much like a slap in the face, because as people who are directly affected and are being like shit on right now by the legal system, and by like family and friends and people who don't value or like appreciate the gravity of this situation, being asked to then show up and try harder, do more, participate again, feels very fucking insulting. And I want to honor that that's real. And again, especially for folks with compounding marginalized identities, for BIPOC people, for queer people, this ask of like, please show up and be an advocate feels bad right now. And so again, this comes with the caveat that if you're not in a place to do this, I want to encourage you to take the time to feel how you feel. If you have a therapist or that's an accessible resource for you, to very much process that with your people, because this fucking blows. This sucks and it's scary and it's hard. And this is like on a personal level, grief and like rage that I've had to work through on my own time, because a lot of at least the feeling for me is very much that like I am tired of being resilient and I am done. I'm ready to rest a little bit, you know? And so I want to honor that for people that like, this sucks. Ew, I didn't expect that I was going to cry. That's annoying. I have some toxic attitudes about my own emotions for a therapist. This is not me like crying in front of my camera like, oh, I feel bad for me. Like, I promise that's not what it is. But I just want to honor that like, this fucking sucks. And if that's where you're at, that's okay. However, for those of you who do have the bandwidth, there are some resources in my description that I want to briefly talk about. First and foremost, I wanted to talk about the like general invitation to donate and get involved and provide support for especially BIPOC-led organizations and like abortion funds and advocacy centers, and also to be mindful of things like mutual aid, like providing direct financial assistance to people in your community and like on a grassroots level being involved in that regard, and especially to caution people against making these like throwaway donations to like the DNC, like the Democratic National Committee, and like these big like political action committees and things like that, because it's becoming increasingly clear that making, you know, the $5 donation to the Democratic National Committee and then voting on election day is no longer sufficient, especially because people campaigned in the Democratic Party in particular, campaigned on this platform of protecting reproductive rights and the rights of the queer community and, you know, the rights of people with uteruses, and then did dick all about it since they've been in office. And so I want to encourage folks to, you know, especially if you have the resources or the privilege or the ability to donate or get involved, to focus that energy and that ability with organizations that have been doing this work for a very long time, that are dedicated to providing support for people on the community level and of the most like marginalized identities, because that work is so fucking impactful and so fucking important right now, especially if providing that support will give you like a little bit of that like serotonin boost. Providing support to organizations like that, like I said, I have them all linked in the description, is a great way to do that. I want to be cautious because I'm not sure to what degree the platform that I'm on is going to censor this content. And so I don't want to name some of those resources specifically because I'm not sure. Like, we're in uncharted territory here, and I'm not sure to what level I'm going to be suppressed for talking about this. So there are, like I said, there are resources in the description for people who directly need support. If you are a person who is scared and needing assistance, resources to find that help directly is in the description. But there are also resources for funds that just help to fund and find transportation and lodging and like all of those things for people who do need that direct support. Also, there's a link to an organization called the Afia Center, and there's also a link to an organization called Indigenous Women Rising. Both of those organizations provide direct support but also provide education and general advocacy, so I want to encourage folks to check those out. There's also a link in there to an article that's just generally serving the purpose of helping to educate about the issue generally. And so if you're in need of like good evidence-based information to share and disseminate and like, you know, provide education for folks, that's there for you also. The last thing that I wanted to talk about is to caution folks against this like narrative that's happening right now, that like this is the beginning of the end, and everything is a disaster and it's all scary. It is scary, don't get me wrong, but I wanted to be clear that again, this is work that has been being done. There are organizations who have been dedicated to this cause for a very long time and who have been actively participating in this conversation before this, you know, like before Roe v. Wade was overturned. I first of all want to caution people against saying things, especially on social media, about like, I will go camping with you, or like offering that direct support. Because there is just like a list, like a bunch of safety hazards that can potentially come along with that. It's very difficult to vet personal safety of you and the person that you're trying to help in this like sort of one-on-one scenario, but also because there are organizations that are reliable and safe and trusted and have the resources to provide that type of assistance. And so if you're a person who feels drawn to that, I would encourage you again to look at the links in the description and to see to what degree you're able to provide support for those organizations instead. But also because making this declaration on social media, I know that it feels like we're using vague and shrouded language, but that might not offer you the legal protection that you think it does. We're not really sure. And again, this is not fucking legal advice. I don't know anything about legal anything. But we are in new territory in some ways, especially legally. And so I do want to encourage folks to protect themselves and to be mindful and conscientious about the things that we are sharing on social media that are potentially incriminating or unsafe for ourselves or for the people that we're trying to help. Because again, this is not like the beginning of this issue. This has been going on for a very long time, especially in marginalized communities. And there are organizations who are skilled, who are proficient, who are ready to help folks that need the help. And they are like poised and available and mostly in need of support. There are wish lists where you can buy physical items, but there are also places that you can just make a straight up cash donation. So again, I want to encourage folks to center your advocacy in those areas. And also to defer to the folks who have the knowledge and the expertise, the folks who've been doing this for years and years and years and know exactly what it is that they need, and where your support and energy can be best utilized right now. All of that said, the last thing that I wanted to talk about is some like boundary setting for myself and for the channel. I already talked about this on my Instagram, but I want to be super fucking clear. I, again, as a person who am directly affected by this situation on a personal level, but also as a human being who is a social worker, who is a clinician. I may be on a leave of absence from clinical work right now, but I am a social worker and an advocate for social and political change first and foremost. And I have and do work directly with populations that are affected by this decision. And so I want to be super duper duper fucking clear. If you are a person who celebrated the victory of Roe v. Wade and talked about how excited you are that people with uteruses are losing their fundamental human rights, this place is not for you. You are not welcome here. My content and my channel and my emotional labor are not for you. And I don't feel bad about drawing that line in the sand. I think the time for kind and compassionate and middle of the road advocacy has long since left us. There are people whose direct personhood is being assaulted by these legal decisions, and I am not going to walk the middle line and to say like there's good and bad on both sides. This is not that. This channel and this content, and especially the advocacy that I'm trying to share with my platform and to use my platform responsibly, is for the purpose of creating equity, not for shielding the feelings of people who hold beliefs that are directly harmful to me and to the people that I seek to help, both as a clinician and as an advocate generally. So I want to be super clear. Abortion is healthcare. Abortion is a fundamental human right that people should have access to, because healthcare is a fundamental human right that people should have free and unfettered access to. And so if those are things that you cannot abide by or that you can't respectfully remove yourself, if that's a deal breaker for you, I will remove you if you're not willing to remove yourself. So that's that. I just wanted to set some really clear boundaries around that issue, because I'm not open to having that conversation. I'm not going to debate anyone in my comment section. If you're going to say things that are dehumanizing and that are hurtful and that fly in the face of like the core beliefs of the work that we're trying to do here, I will just kindly and quietly remove you. That's the end of the conversation. So I want to send love and peace and kindness and respect to those of you who need it. Please know that I see you and that you are allowed to feel how you feel. This channel will always be a place where you're allowed to not apologize for the feelings that you have and to be unapologetically yourself. I can't guarantee your safety here necessarily in terms of like internet censorship and things like that, but do know that you are allowed, I guess, to feel how you feel and to be your authentic and real and true self. That said, if you like the video, subscribe to the channel. Usually we don't fucking make content like this. We will be back to regularly scheduled programming next week. I want to say thank you for being here and for watching it if you made it this far. And that's it. Share the video to help the channel grow and to help each other grow, and I will see you guys next Saturday. Okay, bye.